Imagine spending 20 years building the perfect career. A six-figure salary, one of the country's most respected banking jobs, and complete financial security. Then, at 49 years old, you quit. Not for another executive position. Not because you were fired. But to sell lipstick, online. In 2012, when almost nobody believed people would buy makeup on the internet. It sounds like the worst career decision imaginable. So why did it become one of the greatest business decisions ever made? What happened next almost ended the company, before it even started. By 2012, Falguni Nayar had what most people would call the perfect life. For nearly 2 decades, she had climbed the ranks at Kotak Mahindra Capital, one of India's most respected investment banks. She wasn't just working there, she had become one of its top executives, advising some of the country's biggest entrepreneurs on billion-dollar deals, mergers, and public offerings. Every day, she sat across the table from founders who were building companies that would shape entire industries. She knew how businesses were financed. She knew how markets worked. She knew what separated successful companies from the ones that disappeared. From the outside, it looked like she had reached the finish line. A prestigious title. A highly respected career. Financial security. The kind of life people dream about. So why would anyone give that up? That's the question everyone around her was asking. But the truth was, while she was helping other people build their dreams, a quiet thought had been growing in the back of her mind. What if I never build one of my own? At first, it was easy to ignore. She had responsibilities. A successful career. A family. Walking away from all of that didn't seem practical. But the question refused to go away. It followed her into boardrooms. It stayed with her during late-night meetings. Every time she celebrated another successful deal, the feeling grew stronger. She wasn't afraid of hard work. She was afraid of looking back one day and wondering, what if I had tried? Then something else caught her attention. As an investment banker, she had studied businesses across every industry. She noticed that, around the world, beauty retail was changing. Companies like Sephora had transformed how people discovered and bought cosmetics. But in India, the experience was completely different. Finding authentic beauty products wasn't easy. Counterfeit products were everywhere. Expired cosmetics were being sold. Customers often had no idea if what they were buying was genuine. Most people saw that as an inconvenience. Falguni saw something much bigger. She saw a business built on one missing ingredient. Trust. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. There was just one problem. She had never worked in retail. She had never built a technology company. She knew almost nothing about cosmetics. On paper, it was one of the worst business ideas she could have pursued. Friends questioned her decision. Colleagues thought she was throwing away a career people spend a lifetime trying to achieve.
Salary credited.
Some quietly called it a midlife crisis. Others assumed she'd eventually change her mind. But after months of thinking, she made her decision. In April 2012. At 49 years old, Falguni Nayar resigned. She walked away from the safest chapter of her life. Without knowing if the next one would succeed. She wasn't chasing another executive title. She wasn't leaving for a bigger paycheck. She was starting over. From scratch. And that's when reality hit. Because leaving a prestigious job was the easy part. Building a company that almost nobody believed in. That was about to become the hardest challenge of her life. And what happened next, nearly ended the company before it even had a chance to begin. Leaving the comfort of a corner office felt bold. Living with that decision was something else entirely. The day Falguni walked away from investment banking, she also walked away from certainty. No guaranteed paycheck. No experienced team. No proven business model. Just an idea. And the belief that, if people could finally trust where they bought beauty products, everything else would follow. It sounded simple. Reality wasn't. Her father offered her a small office inside his bearings business in Mumbai. It wasn't a sleek startup headquarters. There were no glass conference rooms. No fancy investors walking through the door. Just a borrowed office that could barely fit 15 people. Some of her first employees weren't startup veterans. They came from her father's own business. They were learning everything together. But here's what almost nobody knew. Before Nykaa could gain customers, it first had to survive itself. The company officially launched in October 2012. But calling it a launch might be generous. The website was unfinished. Pages loaded slowly. Features didn't work properly. The servers struggled to keep the platform alive. Sometimes, just a small spike in visitors was enough to crash the entire website. Imagine spending months building your dream, only to watch customers leave because your website couldn't stay online. It wasn't just frustrating. It was heartbreaking. But technology wasn't even the biggest problem. Nobody was buying. Every morning, Falguni would check the dashboard, hoping things had finally changed. Maybe today, there would be dozens of new orders. Maybe hundreds. Instead, the screen stayed almost empty. One day became another. Weeks turned into months. By the end of the year, Nykaa had received only 60 orders. Not 60,000. Not 6,000. Just 60. Imagine leaving one of the most respected careers in the country. Putting millions of dollars of your own savings into a company. And ending your first year with fewer customers than many neighborhood stores serve in a weekend. This is where most founders give up. Some shut the company down. Others desperately chase growth. Massive discounts. Flash sales. Anything to attract customers. Investors were telling startups the same thing. Grow first. Figure out profits later. But Falguni refused to play that game. And that's where the real story begins. Instead of letting third-party sellers list products on the website, Nykaa bought inventory directly from brands. Every lipstick. Every skincare bottle. Every perfume. The company owned it before selling it. On paper, it looked completely irrational. Buying inventory meant tying up millions of dollars. If products didn't sell, the losses would belong to Nykaa, not someone else. Almost every business expert would have chosen the safer option. Marketplace businesses were growing rapidly because they didn't carry inventory. Nykaa deliberately chose the opposite path. Why? Because Falguni believed customers would only return if they trusted every single product they received. No counterfeits. No expired cosmetics. No fake sellers. Trust wasn't a marketing campaign. It was the business model. Then she made another decision that shocked almost everyone. She refused to build the company through endless discounts. While competitors were spending investor money to sell products below cost, Nykaa held its prices. People questioned the strategy. Would customers really pay full price when cheaper options existed everywhere? It looked like the company was making growth even harder. But Falguni wasn't trying to win today's sale. She was trying to earn tomorrow's customer. And that single decision quietly changed everything. Little by little, the numbers began to move. Brands started noticing. Customers came back. Not because Nykaa was the cheapest, but because people trusted what arrived at their doorstep. Then something remarkable happened. Global beauty companies that had once avoided Indian online retailers started paying attention. Luxury brands wanted authenticity, price control, professional distribution. Everything Nykaa had spent years building. The same decisions people once criticized were suddenly becoming its greatest competitive advantage. By 2014, the company opened its first physical store. Not in a glamorous shopping district. Not with celebrity fanfare. But inside Delhi's international airport. A quiet move that put Nykaa directly in front of travelers already looking for premium products. The business was finally finding its rhythm. Revenue was growing. Customers were returning. Investors were beginning to believe. After years of doubt, it finally felt like all those difficult decisions had been worth it. But success has a way of testing every business. And just when Nykaa seemed ready for its biggest chapter yet, the world suddenly stopped. Stores closed. Cities went silent. And the beauty industry faced a crisis unlike anything it had ever seen. For a company built around products people love to see, touch, and try, this should have been the beginning of the end during COVID. Instead, it became the start of something nobody expected. When the world finally began to trust Nykaa, everything started to change. The same companies that had once been skeptical were now asking for a partnership. Luxury beauty brands had spent years protecting their reputation. One fake product, one uncontrolled discount, could damage a brand that had taken decades to build. That's why many global companies stayed away from online marketplaces. But Nykaa was different. It wasn't built around price wars. It was built around trust. And that trust was about to open doors money couldn't buy. One after another. Some of the biggest names in beauty came on board. MAC, Clinique, Bobbi Brown, Estee Lauder. For Nykaa, these weren't just new products on a website. They were a stamp of approval. If some of the world's most respected beauty companies trusted Nykaa, customers had another reason to trust it too. But Falguni wasn't satisfied yet. Selling other companies' products was only part of the vision. She wanted Nykaa to create products of its own. Not based on guesswork, but based on something far more valuable. Customer behavior. Every search. Every review. Every purchase. Every shade customers couldn't find. The data told a story. And Falguni listened. In 2015, Nykaa launched its own beauty brand. Instead of copying global trends, it focused on what Indian consumers actually wanted. The right shades. The right formulas. The right price. It wasn't just another cosmetics brand. It was built using years of customer insights. And once again, people doubted the decision. Why compete with the very brands that made Nykaa successful? Would customers really buy Nykaa's own products? Or would they always choose international names? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Customers embraced the brand. Sales climbed. Repeat purchases increased. And every successful launch made Nykaa stronger. Then came another milestone that almost nobody noticed at the time. But it would become one of the company's greatest achievements. While many fast-growing startups were burning through investor money, Nykaa quietly became profitable. Think about that for a second. The company that refused endless discounts. The company that insisted on owning its inventory. The company critics called too slow. Was now making money. It proved something powerful. Growth and discipline didn't have to be enemies. They could exist together. It felt like every difficult decision Falguni had made was finally paying off. But success has a way of inviting its biggest test. Then came 2020. Within weeks, the world changed. Cities shut down. Flights were grounded. Shopping malls went dark. Beauty stores closed their doors. For a company built around helping people discover makeup and skincare, this should have been a disaster. No one was leaving home. No weddings. No parties. No office meetings. Who needed lipstick during a global pandemic? For a moment, it looked like years of hard work could disappear almost overnight. But here's what nobody saw coming. Customers didn't stop shopping. They simply changed where they shopped. Instead of walking into stores, they opened their phones. Millions of people stuck at home began watching beauty tutorials, learning skincare routines, experimenting with self-care. Nykaa wasn't just selling products anymore. It was educating customers, building a community, creating trust long before anyone clicked the "Buy Now" button. Traffic surged. Orders increased. The digital business exploded. And while many retailers struggled just to survive, Nykaa accelerated. Investors noticed. Soon, the company crossed a valuation of more than $1 billion. Falguni Nayar had achieved something almost unimaginable. She had built India's first woman-led unicorn. The woman who had once worried about 60 orders in an entire year was now leading one of the country's fastest-growing consumer companies. But the biggest moment was still waiting. In 2021, Nykaa announced it was going public. For nearly a decade, Falguni had been proving skeptics wrong. Now the entire market would decide what her company was worth. Investors rushed in. Demand was extraordinary. The IPO was oversubscribed many times over. When Nykaa finally debuted on the stock market, its shares soared. The company was suddenly worth billions of dollars. Headlines celebrated an overnight success. But there was nothing overnight about it. Behind every headline were years of quiet mourning, broken servers, empty dashboards, sleepless nights, and hundreds of decisions that could have gone the other way. For most founders, an IPO is the finish line. The moment they've been chasing from day one. But public markets don't reward yesterday's success. They demand tomorrow's results. And as one saying on Wall Street goes, going public isn't the finish line. It's where the real pressure begins. For many companies, going public is the happy ending. The moment the founders celebrate. The moment the cameras arrive. The moment everyone says, "We made it." But for Falguni Nayar, the IPO wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of an entirely different game. Because private companies answer to themselves. Public companies answer to everyone. Every 3 months. Investors wanted answers. Analysts questioned every decision. Every earnings report became a headline. Every slowdown became breaking news. The same market that had celebrated Nykaa's spectacular stock market debut now expected the impossible. Grow faster. Expand further. Increase profits. Quarter after quarter. And that's where many great companies lose their way. To satisfy investors. Some slash prices. Some chase reckless growth. Others buy companies simply to make headlines. Falguni had another choice to make. Would she abandon the principles that built Nykaa? Or trust them one more time? She chose trust. Again. Instead of making flashy acquisitions, Nykaa focused on businesses that fit its long-term vision. One of the biggest moves came with skincare brand Nykaa. At the time, it didn't dominate the headlines. Many people barely noticed the acquisition. But Falguni wasn't buying yesterday's success. She was investing in tomorrow's growth. Under Nykaa, Nykaa expanded rapidly. What looked like a quiet acquisition turned into one of the company's smartest investments. But she wasn't finished yet. Falguni knew something most people overlooked. India's beauty market wasn't driven only by shopping malls or luxury stores. Millions of neighborhood beauty shops, Small independent retailers and family-owned businesses were still serving customers every single day. Instead of competing against them, Nykaa decided to work with them. The company launched Superstore by Nykaa. Rather than selling only to consumers, it was a completely different business model. A completely different customer. And once again, people questioned the strategy. Why build another business when the first one was already successful? Because Falguni wasn't building for the next quarter. She was building for the next decade. Soon, hundreds of thousands of retailers were using the platform. Nykaa wasn't just selling beauty products anymore. It was becoming part of the industry's backbone. And then came the number that mattered more than any valuation. Not revenue. Not market capitalization. Not the stock price. Repeat customers. More than 3 out of every 4 customers kept coming back. Think about that. In an industry filled with endless choices, where customers could buy the same lipstick from dozens of websites, millions kept returning to Nykaa. Not because it was always the cheapest. Not because it offered the biggest discounts. But because they trusted it. That trust, built one order at a time, one customer at a time, had become the company's greatest competitive advantage. And that's something competitors couldn't copy overnight. Today, Nykaa has grown into one of India's most recognizable consumer brands. Hundreds of stores. Millions of customers. Thousands of employees. Its own beauty brands. Luxury partnerships. A growing fashion business. And a nationwide retail network. It's a company that looks completely different from the tiny startup that once struggled to process 60 orders in an entire year. But in many ways, nothing has changed. Because the same philosophy that guided Falguni inside that borrowed office still guides the company today. Earn trust first. Growth will follow. Remember the question we asked at the very beginning? Why would someone walk away from one of the safest careers in the country? At 49 years old. To start over in an industry she knew almost nothing about. It wasn't because she wanted more money. She already had financial success. If Falguni Nayar's story taught us anything, it's that the biggest opportunities don't always come early in life. Sometimes, they come after you've already built a successful career. The real question is, if you had everything to lose, would you still bet on yourself? Let me know your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy deep dives into the world's most fascinating companies and the people behind them, subscribe and join us every week as we uncover the strategies, mistakes, and decisions that built billion-dollar empires. Because behind every great company, there's an even greater story.